Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is Troy with Cichlid Bros. In today's video, we are spotlighting the 6-foot African cichlid tank behind me, which has been set up for a little over a year now. And we're going to check out the growth and evolution of this tank during that time. We're going to be taking a look at the fish growth, all the different equipment, how I maintain this aquarium, and we're even going to be unboxing some new fish for this tank. So really excited to walk through this one. Let's dive right in. So it was a little over 1 year ago when we unboxed this custom aquarium. My brothers Alec and Quinn joined me on a cold March day as we unboxed the tank and got it down the stairs into my basement, which was not easy, it never is. But once we got it down here, it was definitely worth it. Like I said, this is a 135 gallon tank from Custom Aquariums, and the stand I really like because it's 36 inches tall, so it's a little bit taller than my other aquariums. And this also came with a seamless sump as my filtration, which I also have in my 150 gallon tank, and I've absolutely loved over the years, so I definitely wanted to go with one again. I like the seamless sump so much that I'm actually putting one on my massive 500 gallon plywood aquarium that's currently being built, so keep an eye out for that. So this tank was intended to be an upgrade for my 75 gallon tank, which had my peacocks and haps at the time, and I wanted to give them a little extra swimming space, so I went with a 6-foot aquarium. And when we set this up, we went with aragonite sand mixed with some crushed shells, so it provided a really different type of substrate than my other aquariums. And aragonite sand is really good for buffering your pH, since Lake Malawi cichlids like a little bit higher pH if you can get that to them. We also added some rock structures to the middle of the aquarium just to provide some line of sight breaks, a few areas where they can hide from other fish, and for the Synodontis petricola to hide within. But we didn't want to take away too much swimming space because peacocks and haps are open water swimmers, and that's very different from Mbuna cichlids from Lake Malawi, which need much more rock structures to swim in and out of to naturally behave. But once you're setting up a peacock and hap tank like this, it's really the fish that are the decor, as they are super colorful, they get pretty big, and they're constantly swimming throughout the tank and providing a lot of activity. I think it's also important to note that I didn't put any live plants in here because they would absolutely destroy and eat them. Some people elect to put plastic plants in their tank, but because they're just open water swimmers, I kept the aquascape really minimal to let them swim back and forth in the tank with as little obstructions as possible. Another reason I wanted to set up a tank like this is just to be in contrast to my South American and Central American tanks. This is a much different setup with a more minimal decor, fish that swim much more actively, and have some really bright colors. I just wanted a different tank than some of my South Americans. Another thing that really stands out about this tank is the lighting system, which is 2 aqualumination freshwater blade lights with a hanging mounting system. I wanted to do something very different with my lighting because on my 150 gallon aquarium I have AI prime lights, and I always get asked about those lights, and it just sets that tank apart from any others that I see out there and my own. So I wanted to take the lesson from my 150 and try to apply it to this tank as well with a LED strip light rather than the puck style of the primes. And originally I just had one 66-inch light with brackets on the sides, but because the light was so long, it kind of bowed in the middle, so I wanted to change that up and get a mounting system, which I installed and screwed into the ceiling, and I got a second light just to make sure it looked correct with the mounting system, and it was totally worth it because this really makes it stand out in the tank. These lights are super bright and powerful, so I have them both turned down to about 10% power, and they definitely light up the tank really well. And you can't really see it on camera, but in person that shimmer is really beautiful on some of those African cichlids. And one thing I absolutely love is just this view right here, where I have my 2 awesome custom aquariums with a beautiful lighting system. The difference between a planted tank with South American cichlids and a more open aquascape with African cichlids, and the different swimming behaviors. Sit here all the time and just admire both tanks. So before we talk about how I maintain this aquarium and unboxing some new fish, let's talk about the current fish stocking and how they've grown over the last year. So I tried to count, and I think I have 23 or 24 cichlids, and then I have 2 Synodontis petricola catfish. And overall I've been really pleased with the growth and health and the color that have really started to pop in some of these fish as they've grown. You'll see in some of the peacocks that they are starting to reach their max size, and they have some really great color already popping, whereas some of the haps are catching up in size and will eventually grow to be much larger and have some really great color pop very soon, maybe over the next few months. So starting with a few of my favorites in the tank, definitely the red shoulder peacock is the tank boss. It has some great size and is a beautiful fish with that blue face and that red shoulder pattern. And then maybe second in command is the big dragon blood, which has some great reddish pink color popping. It is also a pretty big peacock at this point. I really like the color pop in contrast to the other fish, so I've considered adding some more dragon bloods to this tank since each one seems to have a little bit different color pattern and variations. And a couple other peacocks I really like are the lemon jake and the sunshine peacocks with that really bright yellow coming out. Really stands apart from the other fish in this tank. And then maybe my all-time favorite peacock is the Nagara flametail. I love the name and the color pattern on its tail. Mine right here has a little bit of coloring up still to do and some more size to put on, but hoping he starts to become a little more bright and vivid over time. There are a couple other smaller peacocks like the ruby red that is still pretty drab in color and hasn't really gotten its full coloration yet. One of the fish in this tank that hasn't done quite as well is the Luanda peacock, which is a beautiful fish with yellow and blues and purples and a really wide fan tail, which really stands apart in an aquarium. But this one's kind of lowest on the totem pole and in the hierarchy, so it kind of hangs out in the corner and I don't see it all that often. But then when you look at some of the haps in this tank, they're starting to grow and color up. The Z-Rock has some amazing coloration coming down the forehead with that bright yellow. It looks like a big sulfur head peacock, but I really like the Z-Rock. I have a couple blue dolphin cichlids in here, which are still growing, still maturing. They're about 5 or 6 inches now, but they'll probably reach around 9 to 10, and they'll start to get more of that rounded head and look more and more like a dolphin itself. And if they're dominant in the tank, they'll even get that nuchal hump, which will be really cool to see. The star sapphire is probably 5 or 6 inches, has some really good blue color, but you'll start to see there's a little bit of chipping coming in, and maybe over the next few months that chipping pattern will really start to come in and look like an adult star sapphire, which is absolutely amazing. Then you have the Madoka white lips, which is bright blue with some really cool white lips that protrude from its body. That also makes it stand out in the tank. And then you have the Taiwan reef, which was really small when I got it. It was all silver, but it's definitely grown a lot, maybe the most of any other fish in this tank. It's about 6 inches now, and it's starting to get some of the blue, yellows, and orange color patterns that make them really pop in a tank. Then I definitely got to talk about the Cyanochromis fryerii OB. It has that white, blue, and orange color pattern, and anytime I have company over, that's the one that people point out the most. It is an absolutely beautiful fish. It's got some good size. It definitely is pretty dominant in the tank as well. And then there's the deep water hap, and when I put it in this tank, it was maybe only an inch or two, so I was worried about it even surviving. But it did do really well, and it's grown to about 4 to 5 inches now. Some really cool coloration, some teal and blues coming in, and it'll get another 3 or 4 inches, so I'm really excited for that one as well. And then last but not least, the one I wanted to highlight was the eastern hap, which I think is a pretty underrated cichlid. This one has a really cool mean looking face with that black stripe down its eye, and has some of that yellowish green pattern coming in, which you don't see very often with peacocks and haps, so it's a really cool color pattern to contrast with the rest of these. And in my opinion, what really makes a peacock and hap tank look best is when you have that variety of color patterns and it's kind of just a moving rainbow or painting in your aquarium with all those fast moving fish swimming back and forth and providing a ton of activity and entertainment. So next up, let's talk about the maintenance that I've done on this tank over the past year. Clearly you can see I'm doing a water change, which is not as frequent as you might expect on a tank like this because there is a unique element in my sump, which is the algae scrubber. And if you're not familiar with an algae scrubber, basically there is a pump that pushes water through a confined area. The water is trickling down over a net mesh, and within that chamber you have direct lighting on either side, so it grows algae really well. And algae acts like any other live plant by consuming nitrates and lowering those in your aquarium. And because doing a water change in a cichlid tank like this is usually to reduce your nitrates, if you have an algae scrubber or a refugium or something in your sump or pothos or live plants pulling those nitrates out, you won't have the nitrates build up quite as fast in your tank. And I can happily say that that algae scrubber has totally done its job and been worth the investment. This is only my 7th water change in a year on this cichlid tank. And throughout the year when I tested, my nitrates have never been above 20 parts per million, and that algae scrubber has just really worked hard to remove those nitrates. It's basically like a souped up refugium. And I went ahead and did some quick math because over the course of this year, the 52 weeks, I normally would have done a weekly water change. This is only my 7th, so that's technically 45 weeks where I did not do a water change. 30 to 40%, so I'm saving that much water and energy, but even better, I am saving my time. For instance, if that weekly water change is about 30 minutes to complete on average, and there's 45 weeks where I did not perform a water change, That is a time saver of about 23 hours, so almost a full day of my life that I got back this year.
Holy moly.
Not spending it on water changes. Even though doing water changes and maintenance is something I like to do on my aquariums, it's not a total drag. It's still nice to save that time when I have so many other aquariums. Outside of doing that water change maybe once every 2 months, I do regularly scrape some algae off the glass with the flipper, and that usually builds up maybe once a week, and I just do a quick comb over. The glass looks great, crystal clear water, couldn't be happier. And one last thing that's really cool about this tank, just some of the equipment from Cichlids has been great. Not only is running really smoothly, I'm using their pump to drain the water right now, but I also have the Cichlids wave makers and the Cichlids pumps that are all in the same control app, so I can turn off each of the pumps straight from my app, do the water change, fill the tank back up, turn them all right back on my app, and I never have to go under the tank to unplug anything or replug it back in and remember all of that. And that same Cichlids app will send me notifications on my phone if there's a spike in temperature or if a pump gets clogged or anything goes wrong. It's a really nice fail-safe to have. Really enjoyed it. Okay guys, so I got some new fish, so I'm gonna go ahead and unbox here. This was sent to me from Mike at Cichlids, and they have a YouTube channel, Mike and Will, and you might remember them from our series in Washington, D.C., where we filmed both of their fish rooms. And if you remember Mike's fish room tour, he has some peacock cichlids growing out that he had bred in one of his aquariums, and we saw them in person about 3 or 4 months ago, so they have grown up a little bit more, and he decided to send me some. And that's just one of the perks of having some good friends in the hobby. I would definitely recommend checking out that fish room tour video. I will leave a link to it down in the description below. But let's go ahead and get this guy unboxed. A couple of hot hands to keep it warm. And we have 2 bags here. So first bag, this is a German red peacock, and it looks like it has some good size and color. Obviously pretty stressed out from his travel, but we're gonna get him into my 75-gallon tank here really soon and then get a better look at him. And here's the other bag, and you can see it's another one. So we got 2 really beautiful German red peacocks. Gonna get these guys floated, and we'll check them out a little bit later in the video. So the German red peacocks have been doing really well in my 75-gallon aquarium here. I went ahead and put them in the 75-gallon with the electric blue Acara as kind of a quarantine tank because I thought they were a little bit too small to go ahead and put straight into the 135. And I felt like the electric blue Acara would leave them alone, which they have done really well together, so that's all good. And you might see that there are now 3 of them because Mike was nice enough to send an extra, and now I have 3 of them. They're all going to be going in my 135 here. I still want them to put on a little more size before they go in the new tank, but I'm still enjoying them in the quarantine tank. I just can't wait for them to go in the display aquarium very soon. So in the next year of this tank, I'm really looking forward to the continued growth and the color continuing to pop in this aquarium, especially with some of those different haps cichlids. Also adding in the German red peacocks we just picked up today, or just getting some other unique fish like more dragon bloods or albinos. I'm kind of keeping my eye open, but in general this tank is running really smoothly. Couldn't be happier with the equipment choices, the maintenance schedule, how the fish are doing in general. It's just a really rewarding tank to keep, and if you're looking for a peacock and hap tank, hopefully you get a little bit of inspiration from this, or maybe you just take bits and pieces of what I've done here, apply it to your own tank, make it your own, and go from there. But if you'd like to see that fish room tour I talked about earlier with Cichlids, definitely check this one out here. It's an awesome video. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.